That afternoon, I was wrapping up a contract dispute case at my firm in San Francisco. I remember because I had just dropped the opposing counsel's bluff like a house of cards and was enjoying the quiet thrill of it when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Local area code. I almost let it go to voicemail. Wish I had. "Hi, is this Riley Jensen?" A calm male voice asked. "This is she," I replied, tucking the phone between my shoulder and cheek as I gathered my files. "This is Mark with Redwood Valley Bank. I'm calling to verify some information about a mortgage application for the property at 803 Sunrise Hollow Lane." I paused mid-step. "I think you've got the wrong Riley," I said with a polite laugh. "I don't own property there or anywhere for that matter." "That's understandable," he replied, tone shifting subtly. "But you're listed as a co-signer on the application. The primary applicant is Lily Jensen." "That's your sister, correct?" I stopped breathing. The pen in my hand dropped onto the marble conference table with a tiny, traitorous clink. There was no way. Lily? My younger sister? We hadn't spoken in months, maybe over a year, unless you count the awkward half-smiles at family holidays. But co-signing for a mortgage? That was laughable. Except apparently not. "I never signed anything for Lily," I said slowly, my voice colder than I intended. Mark hesitated. "The application was submitted 7 months ago. All documents are on file, including your signature. Your parents brought them to the branch." Silence. Complete, thick silence. And then my pulse roared in my ears. "Can you email me the documents?" "Absolutely. I'll send them within the next few minutes." "There's one more issue, though." "Of course there is. The account is delinquent. 3 months past due. Current balance owed is $18,300. If we don't receive payment soon, we'll have to proceed with legal action." I didn't hear anything after that number. I was already dialing someone else. "Riley?" My best friend and colleague, Eva, answered on the first ring. She knew me well enough to pick up on the first word. "They forged my signature," I said, shaking. "My sister, my parents. I don't even know who else. But they did it." There was a pause on the other end. "I'm coming to your office." "Don't do anything until I get there." When Eva arrived, I had already received the email. We opened the PDF files together. Mortgage application, income statements, co-signer authorization. All with my name. All with my signature. But it wasn't my signature. It was something worse. It was an imitation, the same curvy R. My mother used to sign notes to the school when I was sick as a kid. The same style I had consciously moved away from in law school. Eva's lips thinned. They didn't even try to hide it. "This is sloppy fraud." I nodded, my hands shaking as my phone lit up again. "Mom," I whispered, seeing the name on the screen. Eva gave me a look. "Answer." "Try to stay calm." I took a deep breath and accepted. "Hi, Mom. Oh, honey. Your dad's making enchiladas tonight. Lily's coming by too. You should stop in." The audacity. "I just got a call," I said, trying to steady my tone. "From a bank? About a mortgage. That I supposedly co-signed." Silence. I could hear the air shift through the phone. Then a fumbling voice. "I was going to tell you, it's just, Lily needed help, and you're doing so well, you're successful, she's..." "So you forged my signature?" I snapped. "You risked my job, my credit, my license. What part of that makes sense to you? You're overreacting," she said, voice trembling. "Families help each other." "No," I said through clenched teeth. "This wasn't help. This was theft." And then I hung up. Eva stayed late with me that night. We went through every file, every statement. She dug deeper while I stared at the ceiling, wondering how my own blood had betrayed me with such ease. It didn't end at the mortgage. 3 credit cards, 2 personal loans, 1 business line of credit, all opened in my name. Over $85,000 in debt. My social security number had been used on every application. My signature had been copied. My trust shattered. "I didn't think it could get worse," I whispered as Eva clicked to another tab. "Riley," she said softly. "What?" "There's an investment account. It was used as collateral for a $60,000 business loan." I laughed. Or maybe I choked. I couldn't tell anymore. "I don't even own stock," I said. "I barely touch my 400 wunk. They faked a portfolio," she murmured. This is organized." My phone buzzed again. Lily this time. I didn't answer. Later that night, Eva and I sat in my kitchen, two glassy-eyed lawyers, eating instant noodles and silently calculating just how badly I'd been screwed. My credit score had dropped nearly 200 points. My name was on multiple fraudulent documents across 3 states. If my firm found out, it could end everything I'd worked for. And my own family had done it to me. The next morning, I filed reports with the credit bureaus. I froze my accounts. I contacted the IRS and flagged my identity. And then I printed every document we'd uncovered and slid them into a thick folder. That night, I drove to my parents' house. Lily's car was parked outside. My dad stood at the grill, humming like nothing was wrong. My mother opened the door with a smile that made my stomach turn. "Riley." "What a surprise, cut the act," I said, pushing past her. "Lily?" "Living room. Now." She came down the stairs slowly, face pale. "Riley, I dropped the folder onto the coffee table." "Don't speak," I said. "Not until you've looked at every page." They flipped through silently. I watched their faces shift. My dad's cheeks turned crimson. My mom wouldn't meet my eyes. "Lily," cried. "Of course she did. I didn't mean to hurt you," she whimpered. I needed help." "So you stole from me? You have everything," she snapped. "I have nothing. I just wanted a chance. And now I might lose my job, my license, my future," I shot back. "Because you wanted a shortcut." My mom tried to interject, but I held up a hand. "I'm filing charges," I said. "This isn't a warning. This is war." The room erupted, begging, be blame tears. "Excuses." I said nothing more. I walked out, closed the door, and didn't look back. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of guilt. Not even anger anymore. It was the hollowing kind of betrayal that leaves you cold. I had spent my whole life believing that being the dependable one meant safety, respect, maybe even love. Turns out, it just meant I was the easiest one to exploit. By morning, my apartment smelled like stale coffee and stress. Eva showed up again with breakfast sandwiches and her laptop already open. "You sure about this?" she asked, handing me a greasy bag. "No," I admitted, "but I'm done being the fool in someone else's game." She nodded and started typing. We'd already filed fraud reports with the credit bureaus. The next step was harder, tracking everything down. Every fake account, every forged signature, every lie. Eva pulled up a spreadsheet she'd started the night before. "I've logged all the accounts we know so far." "But Riley, it's bigger than we thought." "How much bigger?" 3 new ones showed up this morning. One of them's a credit line with a $30 limit. Used for, she paused, scrolling. Furniture, electronics, flights to Miami. I blinked. "Miami?" "Yeah. Round-trip tickets for your mom and Lily. 5-star hotel. Spa packages. All last fall. Last fall. When I was working 70-hour weeks on a merger case. When I missed Thanksgiving because I couldn't get away from the office. They were living it up while I was buried in paperwork. Using my name." And then came the twist. "There's more," Eva said, clicking open another tab. "A private fund. Sage Pine Capital Growth. Your name is listed as the fund manager." I don't even know what that is," I muttered. "Well, apparently you're doing great," she said dryly. "At least that's what the fake email thread says." "What email thread?" "They created an email that's almost identical to yours. Just 1 letter off. They've been using it to correspond with potential investors. There are fake reports, updates, even photos of you from LinkedIn." The first stared at the screen, heart pounding. "They didn't just steal my identity. They sold it." That afternoon, we looped in Marcus, a forensic accountant Eva trusted from a previous case. He was quiet and sharp, with the kind of calm that made you listen twice. Within hours, he confirmed what we feared. "They created a shell fund using your identity as cover," he said. "It's not just your credit. They used you to legitimize an entire scam." "Who invested?" I asked, barely breathing. "A few names so far. Some from your parents' social circle. Others, older, vulnerable, high net worth retirees. And they think I took their money?" He nodded slowly. I rubbed my temples, trying to steady myself. "We need to talk to someone bigger. FBI, SEC, whoever handles this." "We will," Marcus said. But first, you need legal armor. Eva had already anticipated that. I've contacted a financial crimes attorney, and we're documenting everything, every email, every forged document, every transaction, every damn lie. That evening, I drove back to my parents' house. Not to talk, not to plead, to warn. They were sitting at the kitchen table when I walked in. My dad looked up, startled. My mom's face went pale. Lily stood in the corner like a kid caught stealing candy, only the candy was my life. We already said we're sorry, my mom began. No, I said. You apologized because you got caught. My dad scoffed. You don't understand. We were just trying to help Lily get on her feet. By ruining mine, she needed a start, he said flatly. You have a career, a condo, stability. And that means you get to tear it all down without asking? Lily stepped forward, eyes red. You don't know what it's like to struggle, Riley. I let out a bitter laugh. Really? I worked through college, skipped meals, studied through pneumonia. You got a free ride and still managed to fail out. That's not fair. No. What's not fair is using my identity to run a Ponzi scheme. Their faces froze. You heard me, I continued. The fund, the emails, the investments. You used my face to con people. That was your father's idea, my mom blurted. He said no one would trust Lily. But you people believe in you. My dad slammed his hand on the table. Watch your mouth, Riley. We're still your parents. And I was still your daughter. That didn't stop you. I placed a thick file on the table. I've already started the process. Fraud claims. Federal filings. The FBI will be in touch soon. You wouldn't dare, my father hissed. I already did. Lily collapsed into a chair, sobbing. You're going to destroy us. No, I said quietly. You already did that. I'm just making sure you don't do it to anyone else. By the next morning, I was sitting across from Solana Reed, a specialist in high-value financial crimes. She was younger than I expected, early 30s maybe, but sharp as glass. You've got something serious here, she said, flipping through the evidence. Multiple felonies, wire fraud, identity theft, investment fraud, possibly racketeering. So, what happens now? We file everything with the FBI's white-collar division. Meanwhile, the first recommend freezing all your accounts and transferring anything salvageable to new ones. You'll also need an independent audit of your taxes, just in case. Just in case they faked my tax returns too? I asked bitterly. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Eva stayed with me that night again. We didn't talk much. Just stared at the ceiling like two survivors clinging to a raft. They used you, she whispered, because they knew no one would question you. I spent years building that trust, I said, and they turned it into a weapon. But now you get to turn it back. The next week was a blur. I met with investigators, transferred my accounts, drafted affidavits. I even changed the locks on my office and added two-step verification on everything. I wasn't just cleaning up a mess. I was preparing for war. Then came the call I'd been dreading and expecting. A man named Henry Drake, one of the investors, left me a voicemail. His voice was tight, controlled. Miss Jensen, I trusted you. I gave your fund my entire pension. If this is some kind of game, I hope you know what it cost me. I didn't cry. I called him back. Mr. Drake, I said calmly. I'm sorry. I didn't run that fund. I didn't even know it existed until last week. But I'm doing everything I can to expose what was done using my name. And I promise, I won't stop until it's made right. He didn't speak for a long moment. Then, softly, I hope that's true. Later that night, I got a text from Lily. I'm sorry. Please don't do this. I can fix it. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. It's strange how quickly your life can divide itself into before and after. Before, I was a woman who believed boundaries and loyalty could coexist. After, I was a woman learning to draw blood from betrayal. I spent most of the next week locked inside conference rooms and law offices. My calendar, once filled with client meetings and court dates, now looked like the blueprint of a crisis. Investigators, financial analysts, cyber forensics, law enforcement, and everywhere I went, the same look, pity, disbelief, a touch of admiration. They all said the same thing in different ways. "You're handling this better than most." But they didn't see the tremors in my hands when I checked my email, the way I flinched every time my phone rang, or the quiet ache that curled around me when I passed family photos on my hallway wall. I hadn't taken them down yet. I don't know why. Maybe because a part of me was still hoping this was all some twisted misunderstanding. Maybe because the grief of losing a family you're still technically related to doesn't happen all at once. It bleeds in slow. Solana and I had just finished our second sit-down with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. The agents had asked sharp questions, but they were clearly stunned by the scope of the fraud. "They didn't just use your identity," Agent Harris said, flipping through a file. "They constructed a version of you, a persona they used to pitch an entire fictional investment world. They created a brand around you," Solana added, "which means every trace of your digital footprint is a liability now. LinkedIn, your law firm's bio, even your TEDx talk from 3 years ago, it's all been used to build their credibility." I blinked. "They used my TEDx to pitch legitimacy to retirees," she confirmed. "Your quote about financial ethics in legal frameworks is front and center in one of the presentations." My stomach turned. "I'll have everything scrubbed," I muttered. Solana shook her head. "Too late for scrubbing. It's time to go public." We held the press conference 2 days later. It was brief, clinical, and carefully worded. I didn't name names, not yet, but I confirmed the core truth. My identity had been stolen and used to facilitate a fraudulent investment scheme. I thought going public would bring relief. Instead, it brought more attention. And something worse. Fear. I started receiving emails, dozens, then hundreds. People the first didn't know. People my parents knew. People who had invested or almost did. Most were kind. Some were furious. A few were threatening. But one message stopped me cold. "I trusted you because your mom said you were brilliant. I gave them $150,000. I'm 71. I don't have another shot at rebuilding. If this doesn't end well, neither will I." I didn't even realize I was crying until Eva pulled the laptop away from me. "You can't carry everyone's pain, Riley." "I know," I whispered, "but I can't pretend this isn't my shadow either." She didn't say anything. She just stayed beside me as the tears fell. That night, Solana invited me to her office for an update. I thought we were reviewing paperwork. I walked in and found a whiteboard covered in names, red yarn, account numbers, transaction logs. It looked like something from a thriller movie. "But this wasn't fiction. This is what we're looking at," she said, pointing at the names. 17 confirmed investors, 8 pending, 4 shell companies, 2 foreign accounts. All roads lead back to your parents' trust account and a joint account opened under your name with Lily as secondary. I stared at it all, felt the dizziness kick in. "And the money?" I asked, even though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Roughly $5.4 million shares circulated through these accounts. About $2.1 million is traceable and frozen. The rest, she exhaled, possibly laundered. We're working on it. I didn't speak. I couldn't. "Riley," she said, voice softening, "you need to be prepared. This isn't just identity theft. It's federal. It's international. And when it all breaks, your parents, your sister, they're not walking away with a slap on the wrist." I nodded slowly. "Good," she added, "because tomorrow we're calling them in." The meeting was set under the pretense of a clarification session with the bank. Frankly, I think they still believed they could talk their way out of it. I arrived early. The bank had cleared out one of their large conference rooms. Inside, the agents were already in position, plainclothes and quiet. Solana sat beside me, composed as always. Eva waited near the exit, a silent force of nature. At 10:03 a.m., my parents walked in. Lily trailed behind them, eyes swollen, clutching her phone like it was life support. My mother smiled when she saw me. "Riley, sweetheart, I knew you'd come to your senses." I stood up and slid the folders across the table. "Let's not do this," I said, tone flat. "Let's not pretend we're having a family reunion." My father opened the folder, his jaw clenched. My mother looked confused, then pale. "Lily didn't even look. Where did you get all this?" my dad asked, flipping through a bank statement with my forged signature at the bottom. "Where do you think?" I replied. The same places you left your digital fingerprints. I don't know what this is supposed to prove, he muttered. Solana spoke for the first time. It proves you used your daughter's name and reputation to commit fraud. Millions in damages. Dozens of victims. We didn't steal anything, my mom whispered. We borrowed. We were going to pay it back. With what? I snapped. Hope? Excuses? Lily's non-existent income? I was going to fix it, Lily said, her voice cracking. You didn't even try, I said. You just waited to see how long you could ride my credit before the house collapsed. Silence. Then the door opened, and Agent Harris stepped inside. Gordon, Dana, Lily Jensen, you are hereby under investigation by the Federal Bureau of Investigation for identity theft, wire fraud, and securities violations. The room shattered. My mom broke into tears. My dad shouted something about injustice. Lily dropped her phone and collapsed into a chair. I stood, walked to the door, turned back once. I gave you every chance, I said, and you gave me every reason to stop trying. Back at the office, Eva poured me a glass of water. My hands were still shaking, but not from fear anymore. It was grief, real heavy grief, not just for what they did, but for who I thought they were. They'll never forgive you, she said quietly. I know, I said, but I'm not doing this for forgiveness. I opened my laptop, drafted my final report to the FBI, then opened a blank page and titled it Sagepine, How My Family Turned My Name into a Weapon. Because if they were going to turn me into a tool for destruction, I was going to become a weapon for truth. By the time the trial date was announced, the media had already branded it the Jensen family Ponzi case. My inbox overflowed with interview requests. My face lifted from my own professional profile, appeared on cable news panels, clickbait headlines, even Reddit threads dissecting my facial expressions during the press conference. The internet had opinions. They always do. But I wasn't reading the headlines. I was reading victim statements. 18 letters. 18 voices describing how they'd been charmed, reassured, convinced. By my parents. By Lily. By a version of me they'd never met but trusted anyway. They'd used me like a stamp of credibility. And I'd been silent too long. The courtroom felt colder than I expected. Maybe it was the air conditioning. Maybe it was the weight in my chest. I sat in the front row beside Solana, Eva behind me, and 3 of the victims who had become more than just names in a report. They were the reason I didn't back out. The reason I chose to speak. The defendants walked in, wrists cuffed but heads high. My father looked like he was still in control. My mother wore a mask of sorrow she thought might earn pity. And Lily looked hollow, like a house with the lights turned off. When my name was called, I stood. Not because I had to, because I needed to. I'm Riley Jensen, I said, clearing my throat. And the name you've seen on investment decks and bank documents? That's mine. But the person behind those transactions wasn't. I paused. The people who did this used my credentials, my reputation, my face. They forged my signature, hacked my email, copied my voice. The room was silent. The judge watched me closely. They didn't just steal money. They stole trust. Not just from me, but from every person who believed that fund was real because they believed I was real. I looked across the courtroom, right into Lily's eyes. I know who I am. I've spent my life building a name rooted in integrity. And you turned that name into a mask for lies? The prosecution followed with witness after witness, financial analysts, cybercrime investigators, even a handwriting expert who confirmed the forgeries. But nothing hit harder than the victims. One by one, they stood and told their stories. A retired librarian who had trusted my mom since college. A widower who invested in hopes of giving his grandchildren a future. A nurse who lost her emergency savings. Each of them said the same thing. They believed in me. Because my family told them to. My mother cried. My father's face stayed like stone. Lily barely moved. By the time the courtroom broke for recess, my legs felt like they were made of rusted iron. Eva walked beside me silently until we reached the hallway. You did what you needed to do, she said, handing me a bottle of water. I just wish it didn't have to be this way. She looked at me. Not with pity, but something quieter. Sadness, maybe. Understanding. Some people cut ties. You had to cut through chains. The defense tried its best. They painted my father as a misguided protector, my mother as naive, Lily as a scared girl led by bad decisions. They called it a family misunderstanding. They tried to recast the fraud as mismanagement, the identity theft as accidental, and the investments as well-intended. But the paper trail didn't lie. The emails, the bank accounts, the hidden overseas transfers, the fake fund website. Even a secret group chat where my mother boasted about finally monetizing Riley's image. The prosecutor read that line aloud in court. It echoed like a slap. Sentencing day came sooner than expected. The evidence was too tight, the damage too vast. Judge Delacourt didn't mince words. Gordon Jensen, Dana Jensen, and Lillian Jensen, this court finds you guilty on all counts. Wire fraud, identity theft, securities fraud, conspiracy, and aggravated financial exploitation. My father clenched his jaw. My mother sobbed into her sleeves. Lily just looked at me. The judge continued, "This was not an accident. It was an organized betrayal committed under the illusion of trust." Then came the verdict: Gordon Jensen, 18 years in federal prison, no parole for the first 10, Dana Jensen, 15 years, plus financial restitution. Lillian Jensen, 10 years and a permanent ban from working in financial sectors. All assets would be seized. Property, cars, bank accounts, jewelry, anything linked to the fund. I didn't cry. I didn't feel triumphant either. Justice has a strange silence to it. It doesn't roar. It just arrives. That evening, I returned to my apartment and stood in front of the family photos on my hallway wall. I pulled them down one by one, not with anger, with release. I wrapped each one carefully, slid them into a box, sealed it shut, and wrote one word on the outside: done. The following week, my firm offered me a month off. I declined. I needed motion, direction. So I launched something instead. Eva and I co-founded a pro bono service for victims of financial exploitation, especially those betrayed by family. We called it Second Ledger because every number has a story, and every victim deserves a new record. The first client we helped was a single dad whose sister had taken out a mortgage in his name. The second, a retired vet whose son racked up gambling debts under his Social Security number. And for the first time in months, I felt something that didn't hurt: purpose. Late one night, while finalizing paperwork in the office, I got a text. Unknown number. "I know you won't respond, but I'm sorry, I didn't realize how deep we were until it was too late." Lily the first stared at it for a while, then turned off my phone. A few days later, Solana handed me a folder. Inside was the last of the forensic report. It confirmed something I hadn't expected. They hadn't just used my accounts. They'd installed spyware on my personal laptop. My mom had done it during one of her visits, when she asked to check her email real quick. It all felt so surgical, so premeditated. Even now, I'm not sure which part broke me more: the betrayal itself, point, or how little hesitation it took. I stood by a window that afternoon, watching the sun dip behind the city skyline. Eva walked in holding 2 mugs. "Still thinking about them?" she asked. "No," I said. "Not them. Just everything." She handed me one of the mugs. "You can't unlose what's already gone." I nodded. I just never expected to build a life without them. And yet, she smiled softly. "Here you are." They say grief isn't always loud. Sometimes it just sits in the corner of the room, quiet as dust, waiting to be noticed. After the sentencing, my life didn't suddenly feel better. It just felt open, like walking out of a storm only to realize the ground is still soaked, and everything you once counted on needs replanting. For the first time in months, my apartment didn't feel like a bunker. It felt like mine again. Quiet, yes, but not haunted. I moved slowly through the days, not out of depression, but caution, like someone recovering from a long illness, testing each step. Some mornings, I would wake up convinced I heard my mom's voice in the kitchen or Lily's laughter in the hallway. Just echoes, ghosts of a before life that didn't belong here anymore. I didn't chase them away. I just let them fade. Eva and I spent more time at the office than we probably should have. But when pain gives you purpose, sometimes you don't know when to stop. Second Ledger was growing faster than we expected. Word had spread. Quietly, at first. A blog post. a whispered referral, a Reddit thread about family scams that linked to our intake form. In under 3 weeks, we received over 200 submissions. Retirees, college students, divorced parents, people from every background sharing the same broken truth. I trusted them. And again, and again, I thought I was safe. That phrase started showing up in every intake, so we made it our tagline, because safety should never be a gamble. One evening, I stayed behind after Eva left. I was combing through intake notes when I came across a woman named Marla, 56, single, ran a flower shop in Kansas for 27 years. She trusted her niece to help run her books while she recovered from surgery. The niece drained her accounts, used her name to apply for 3 loans, then vanished. Marla lost the shop, her house, her pension. And still, at the end of her letter, she wrote, "I don't want revenge. I just want to feel like I exist again." That line gutted me because I understood it deeply. Sometimes when people betray you, it's not the money or the mess that hurts the most. It's that for a moment you become invisible. That weekend, I drove out to the coast, alone. No emails, no clients, no paperwork, just silence and shoreline. I sat on a bench overlooking the sea, the air crisp and honest. There's something healing about the ocean, not because it gives you answers, but because it never lies. It doesn't care what you've lost. It just keeps moving. Watching the waves, I whispered things I hadn't said out loud in months. I miss who I thought you were. I'm still angry. I'm still here. And for the first time, that last sentence didn't feel like a battle cry. It felt like peace. The next morning, back in the city, Solana called. "Are you sitting down?" she asked, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Always?" I said. "Why?" The final round of asset seizures went through. The international accounts. We recovered $1.4 million. I blinked. "And it gets better," she added. "The restitution fund's been approved. The victims are getting partial payouts starting next week." My breath caught. "It's not everything they lost," she said, "but it's a start." A start. That word had a weight I hadn't felt in months. Later that day, Eva walked into my office with 2 iced coffees and a grin. "They're calling you the comeback queen on TikTok," she said, laughing. "God help me." "No, seriously. Someone clipped your courtroom testimony and added music. It's gone semi-viral." I groaned. "Please tell me it's not the 'I know who I am' line." "Oh, it absolutely is. Perfect." My trauma is trending. We laughed harder than we had in weeks. Maybe that's the secret nobody tells you. Healing doesn't always arrive as a grand moment. Sometimes it's a stupid TikTok and a good coffee with someone who stood by you through the wreckage. In the following weeks, we hosted our first in-person Second Ledger event. Nothing fancy. Just a small room in a rented community center with foldable chairs, bottled water, and people brave enough to show up. I stood at the front, palms sweating slightly. "I'm not here to tell you how to heal," I began, "because I'm still figuring that out myself." A few people nodded. Some smiled gently. "I'm just here to say, I know what it feels like when the people you trusted most turn into strangers." Silence. Not heavy, just attentive. And I know it doesn't happen in one blow. It happens in small betrayals, half-truths, paperwork you didn't read, gut feelings you ignored, until one day you look around and realize you've been erased from your own life. That line stayed in the air like incense. Then an older man in the back raised his hand. "How do you stop feeling like a fool?" he asked. Not accusing, just tired. I looked at him and said, "By remembering that love without respect isn't love. It's leverage." After the session, a young woman came up to me, early 20s, nervous. She didn't say anything at first, just handed me a folded piece of paper and walked away. I opened it later. Inside was a single sentence. "Your story gave me permission to stop lying for my family." I folded it carefully and tucked it in my wallet. Some truths you carry close. A month passed. Then 2. I moved through life differently now, not with fear, not even with anger, but with precision. I started seeing a therapist not because I was falling apart, but because I finally had space to rebuild with intention. We didn't talk much about my parents or Lily. We talked about control, boundaries, forgiveness that doesn't require re-entry, We talked about how I'd spent years earning love that was always conditional, and how, when it finally snapped, I learned the difference between loyalty and obedience. Then came the email. Subject line: family photos. Do with them what you will. It was from a storage unit company. Apparently, my mother had boxed up every photo, every childhood drawing, every letter I'd written to Santa, and dropped them off under my name. I went, alone. The unit was small, cold, dusty. I opened one box and saw a drawing of a horse I made when I was 6. My mom had written "My brilliant artist" in the corner in Sharpie. I sat on the floor and stared at it for a long time. Then I took out one photo, just one. The 4 of us at a county fair. I was maybe 12. Lily had cotton candy on her cheek. My dad wore his old cargo vest. My mom held my hand. They looked real. We looked happy. And maybe we were. In that moment, I kept the photo. Everything else I left behind. Spring arrived like a soft apology. The kind of season that doesn't make promises, just opens the window and lets in the air. It had been almost 8 months since the sentencing. 8 months since I took my name back. Since I drew the line that finally stayed drawn. And I was still here, not untouched, not invincible, just here, living. Second Ledger was now operating full-time with 3 legal volunteers and a growing list of allies across the country. Our small project had become a resource hub for victims of financial abuse, with everything from legal templates to support circles to mental health partnerships. We were building something real. And for once, I wasn't just reacting to life. I was shaping it. Even I still worked side by side most days. There was comfort in that, the kind you can't buy or fake, earned through long nights, courtroom stares, and the kind of silence that understands you. Solana stayed on board, now part of our advisory team. She always had that steady energy, the kind that didn't just fix problems, it made sure they didn't happen again. And me? I stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. Stopped wondering if every phone call was a fire. Stopped apologizing for guarding my peace like a fortress. One evening, I stood in the center of the auditorium we'd rented for our first annual Survivor Conference. Rows of chairs filled the space. String lights hung gently above the stage. The air buzzed with low conversation, the hum of nervous courage. I looked out at the crowd, nearly 300 people. People who had all, at some point, been betrayed by someone they once loved. People like me. I stepped onto the stage and let the moment breathe before I spoke. My name is Riley Jensen, I began. And like many of you, I used to think love and protection were the same thing. That family was always safe. That being loyal meant staying silent. I paused, letting my gaze move across the room. I was wrong. A few people nodded. A few dropped their heads. Family, in its truest form, doesn't ask you to bleed quietly. It doesn't demand your identity as collateral for someone else's comfort. Real family by blood or by bond walks with you, not over you. Silence settled. But it wasn't heavy. It was understanding. I lost people I never thought I'd live without. And I found strength I never knew I had. Not in spite of what happened, but because I refused to disappear inside it. That night, as we packed up, an older woman approached me with a nervous smile. She held my hand in both of hers. "I brought my daughter," she whispered. "She hasn't spoken to me in a year. But tonight, after hearing you, she asked me to sit with her." Her eyes welled up. "Thank you for giving us a place to begin again." I nodded, too full of emotion to say much. Just held her hand a moment longer before letting go. A few days later, I received a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside, a single handwritten note. "You were always stronger than me." I see that now. I hope one day you'll understand why I followed them, why I let it happen. I didn't know how to stop, but I'm trying now. For real this time. I folded it once and placed it in the drawer with the others. Not out of forgiveness, but out of closure. I didn't need to reply. Some doors don't need to be slammed shut. Some just need to be left unopened. That weekend, I walked through the neighborhood where I grew up. Not for nostalgia, just curiosity. The old park still had the cracked swing. The bookstore where Lily and I used to split candy money was now a dentist's office. Even the house, my parents' house, stood unchanged, but empty. A for sale sign in the yard, I didn't stop, didn't linger, just kept walking. Not with bitterness, with peace. I've learned healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering differently, without flinching, without shrinking, without carrying the weight like it's still yours to bear. A month later, I hosted our first podcast episode for Second Ledger. We titled it, What We Keep. I spoke for almost an hour, not about what was done to me, but about what I reclaimed. I kept my voice, I said into the mic. I kept my name. I kept my ability to choose who deserves my truth. And I let go of needing an apology to feel whole. I paused, took a breath, then ended with a line that had become something of a personal mantra. Love isn't a reason to erase yourself. And being related doesn't give anyone permission to rewrite your story. And just like that, the episode went live. I turned off the mic, sat back, and smiled. Not a big smile, not some triumphant movie scene grin, just a small, grounded one. The kind that says, I made it through. I still keep that one photo, the one from the county fair. It's in a drawer now, not out in the open. I don't look at it often, but I don't throw it away either, because it reminds me of something important, even if they changed. Who I was in that moment didn't. That little girl with the bright eyes and the sticky cotton candy fingers, she deserved better. And I gave her that. In the end, that's what mattered most. A year later, I stood in front of a group of law students as a guest lecturer. The topic? Ethics, identity, and the cost of silence. I looked at all those young, eager faces, full of ambition and untouched belief in the law, and I told them my story, not with drama, not with bitterness, but with clarity. I told them what happens when power is misused, when trust becomes currency, when silence becomes complicity. And I ended with this, the justice system can give you outcomes. But truth? That's something you have to carry, protect, and sometimes fight for, even when it costs you everything you thought was sacred. Later that evening, I sat by my window, tea in hand, city lights blinking like stars that never sleep. Eva texted a photo, our firm's new plaque. Second Ledger Legal Collective founders, Riley Jensen and Eva Morales underneath in smaller font. Because everyone deserves a clean start. I smiled again. Because this time, it wasn't about what I lost. It was about what I built and who I became when the ground gave way. Story 2, I'm Sarah, and I was taught a painful lesson in my family at a young age. No one ever got love evenly. In my parents' perspective, my older brother Daniel was always the best child. Not every event was filled with admiration for him. Everything our family had to offer was bestowed onto him, as well as myself. The shadow in the backdrop was myself, the one they only thought about when they had jobs to perform or when they wanted to make comparisons to Daniel in order to increase his appreciation. That Christmas is still fresh in my mind. Daniel yelled with delight at seeing the newest game console as he opened the largest box beneath the tree when I was 7 years old. My mom even took out her phone to capture this unique occasion, and my parents were beaming. I waited for my turn in silence, trying not to become too excited. My present? The tag is still on a gray t-shirt that was purchased on discount, $3.99 with a plumbing company's logo on it. No one had bothered to choose it for me because it was too huge, too ugly, and too apparent. My mother simply grinned and said, "You should learn to be content, sweetie. Daniel is older. He need more significant stuff." I sat in the corner and watched Daniel play his new game after forcing a grin. His ecstatic face was illuminated by the glowing screens as I blinked away the sting in my eyes. The holidays never got any better. They arranged a spectacular outside celebration for Daniel's 16th birthday. The band was performing live. They handed him a brand new Ford with a large red bow on the hood, and the event took place in a park by a lake. Almost everyone in the area came to see me. I had the opportunity to invite 2 friends over for frozen pizza while we sat in the living room under the dim yellow light. A cheap notepad and a ballpoint pen were my birthday presents. Not even one that's cute. Those nice folks give out for free at job fairs. You're realistic. You don't need anything extravagant, according to my dad. When Daniel went to college, my parents paid for all of his tuition and provided him with monthly spending money, so he had all the luxuries without ever having to ask. For my part, I received a lengthy lecture about maturing and being self-sufficient, along with a mountain of student loan applications. Nobody inquired about my well-being, if I was hungry, or whether I was worn out from working late shifts. I used to think that things would improve if I simply put forth more effort. However, that final glimmer of optimism was vanished by the time I graduated. There was a huge party in the lawn to welcome Daniel home. A 3-tiered cake with confetti poppers. From family, cheers. For all his efforts, my parents rewarded him with a starter house in the northern suburbs. Me? With a takeout box of fast food, I entered our little dining room, which was occupied solely by my parents. I was given a simple white envelope. I was hoping it might be a little check to assist pay off the rest of my tuition. However, there was a $2 Slotto scratch-off ticket inside, for amusement only. As if it were the sweetest little joke, my mother stated it with a smile. "Perhaps you'll succeed." I glanced up at them. Neither of them appeared uncomfortable or guilty. My father shrugged. "You are aware of the situation. We invested all of our money in Daniel's home." I gave a hollow, weary grin. I nodded and put the ticket in the pocket of my old coat after folding it. I wasn't furious, though. I had nothing. As it happens, I was never a part of my family's actual plan, and I was starting to realize that I would have to create my own place in this world, if I wanted one, not counting on anyone to provide it to me. When the graduation meal ended in silence, I packed up everything I owned. A few vintage garments. They left the residence with a battered laptop and a red luggage that was damaged. I had never really been accepted. I rented a small studio apartment in downtown Cincinnati, where the icy quiet of my parents' house was replaced with the orange glow of streetlights and the sound of automobile horns at midnight. A loud electric stove that buzzed every time I switched it on. A little desk and a single bed were all I could fit in my tiny flat. The pipes leaked in the cold, the walls were discolored, and the neighbors' fights were heard over the paper-thin walls. At least it was mine, though. Nobody made fun of me. I was never likened to Daniel. Nobody advised me to be thankful for the Christmas sales on clothing. To make ends meet throughout the day, I worked 2 jobs. I worked for a small billboard firm as a marketing assistant. I served clients, cleaned tables, and took out the garbage at a bakery by the market until almost midnight. During those initial weeks, I would return home with hurting feet and hands that smelled like frying oil and flour, but I felt lighter than I had ever felt at home. In the family group chat, where I was still officially included, my relatives hardly ever texted or called to check on me. Daniel remained at the center of everything. For the 3rd time, my mom would send pictures of him grinning in their newly renovated living room or posing with his new automobile, with the remark, "The kid deserves it all." My dad shared footage of Daniel and his girlfriend enjoying a Florida vacation. I never participated in such discussions. Even after I made a quick check-in, "How are things going for everyone?" Only a few generic emojis were used in the responses. There were moments when I questioned whether anyone would notice the $2 lottery ticket my mother gave me on graduation night if I vanished. Buried beneath a few coins, a dried-out pen, and an overdue electric bill, it was still sitting in the drawer next to the kitchen. I didn't bother scratching it. It served as a painful reminder to me that that was all I was worth in my parents' view. Not a true investment, but a hazy chance. I used to walk past that drawer every night. Occasionally, I would touch the ticket's creased edge with my fingers before closing it once more. I convinced myself that I didn't require anyone's approval because I was accustomed to being ignored. But occasionally, during those silent moments, I could still hear my mother's voice in my head. Like a splinter under my skin, "Daniel needs more." Even when I slept, I kept it with me. Then, one Friday night, I sat quietly at the dessert table and received an invitation to a small party that a coworker was throwing. After a while, a girl from the creative team named Marissa struck up a conversation with me about her job. With a smile, she asked Sarah while tilting her head, "Why don't you ever discuss your family with me?" "Perhaps because they never truly saw me as a part of it," I said after hesitating for a moment. Marissa refrained from prying. She simply nodded as if she knew more than anyone. Somewhere deep inside, that sense of being heard without being judged was like a tiny crack opening. I opened the drawer when I got home that evening. In months, for the first time, under the thin silver coating, I picked up the ticket and gazed at the numbers. My heart slowed. Something pushed me, but I wasn't sure why. I was fed up with feeling unworthy, not because I wanted to be wealthy. I placed the ticket on the table, picked up my phone, and visited the state lottery website to find out how to check it. My phone buzzed at that moment, alerting me to a fresh message from the family group chat. I took it open. It was a photo Daniel had just posted. He stood in front of a house, arm around his girlfriend, and behind them was a wooden sign that read "Playground for our firstborn. Coming soon." Underneath were messages from my parents. So proud. "Daniel's going to be a dad. Couldn't be happier." Not a single word from me. I gave a small laugh, but this time it wasn't bitter. I set my phone down, uncapped the pen, and gently scratched off the silver layer. No matter what the outcome was, I was ready for change. I could barely breathe as the numbers revealed themselves. My heart pounded so hard I had to place a hand over my chest to make sure I was still conscious. I blinked, repeating each number under my breath, afraid I was reading them wrong. 81427334256. I looked at my phone screen where the Ohio Lottery website flashed. "Congratulations. You've won the jackpot $134 million. I dropped the pen and stared at the ticket like it had just burst into flame in front of me. It wasn't a joke, it wasn't a dream. I had really won. The whole apartment seemed to hold its breath with me. I didn't scream. I didn't jump up and down like people do on TV. I just sat there, silent, hands trembling, mind spinning with a single question. Now what? I didn't call anyone. There wasn't a single person in my life. I felt safe sharing this with my family. They wouldn't ask how I felt. They'd only ask how much I planned to share. That same night, I sat down at my laptop and typed into the search bar, "What to do when you win the lottery?" Hundreds of results came up, but I chose one from a well-known financial site. The first tip it emphasized: don't tell anyone. Find a trustworthy financial advisor. I wrote down a few of the top-rated names in the city. After a lot of thought, I chose someone named Carol Whitman, a financial expert with over 20 years of experience whose office was on the 19th floor of a sleek glass building in downtown Cincinnati. I was so nervous before that first meeting, I almost didn't go. I wore my simplest dress, tied my hair back neatly, and arrived 15 minutes early. Carol's office smelled like peppermint tea, and soft jazz music played in the background. She greeted me with a firm handshake, her bright brown eyes looking like they'd seen hundreds of stories just like mine before. "This isn't something that happens every day," Carol said, after I told her everything in one breath. "But it's not magic either. We're going to turn this into a long-term opportunity, not a one-time stroke of luck." For 3 hours, she helped me create a detailed plan. I wouldn't claim the prize under my real name. We'd set up a limited liability company, an LLC, to receive the funds. That way, my identity would stay completely private. Carol called in a tax attorney, then an investment specialist. The crew worked together like they were the only people in the world I could trust. Maybe they truly were. After submitting all the documents and finishing the procedure, I received my first check, $85 million after taxes, placed into a new account under the company's name. I couldn't believe I was holding a number that used to exist only in my fantasies. I once ate instant noodles for 3 straight months, only to save money for the energy bill. Now I could buy the entire building I lived in, but I didn't. I started with little measures, paid off my college loans, cleared all my credit card accounts, moved out of my previous apartment and into a tiny, peaceful house in the suburbs where the maple trees glowed a magnificent scarlet every fall. No mansion, no sports car. I got a gray hybrid Lexus. Sleek, stylish, but low profile. I retained my daytime marketing work, at least for the first few weeks. Not because I needed the money, but because I needed time to get acclimated to this new version of myself. A Sarah who wasn't continually backed into a corner. The nighttime shift at the bakery was the only job I quit immediately. I sent the proprietor a handwritten note of appreciation and a modest donation to help with the cake display expansion. I had never written a more considerate farewell. It wasn't the sense of freedom that caught me off guard. The item was it. I made coffee every morning in a bright kitchen while watching the birds chirping in the backyard. I would take a seat, read a book, and stop thinking about my mother's passive-aggressive calls and payment deadlines. Next to my desk, That lottery ticket is currently displayed in a little glass frame. Not to boast, but to serve as a reminder that sometimes all we need is a chance, even if it presents itself in the most unlikely of ways, and that I didn't need anyone else to make me feel valuable for the first time in my life. In my own hands, I discovered it. After then, life seemed like a dream, but the sort you keep hidden, like a secret you'd rather not reveal. On my last day, 3 months later, I formally quit my marketing position. To express my gratitude to everyone, I brought a little flower of lavender and 2 boxes of cinnamon waffles. I informed them that I had received an offer to work as a freelancer with a Seattle-based creative agency. Nobody questioned it. I had always put forth a lot of effort, always had larger dreams. I relocated to Edgewood, a peaceful southern Ohio suburb. A week later, I purchased a 2-story modern farmhouse with big windows that let in the morning light, an open kitchen with a granite island, and a large backyard. I must have hit it big with unicorn stock, several neighbors quipped. I simply responded, I work remotely as a freelancer for a foreign company, with a slight smile. Enough ambiguity that nobody inquired further. I chose a pearl white Tesla as my vehicle. Like my new existence, it's quiet and fluid. With a customized plate that just said SK27, I registered it in the business's name. Only I knew that it represented my name, Sarah King, and the day of my birth. I felt light every morning as I stood on the balcony, gazed at the tree-lined driveway, and prepared coffee with my new machine. I began writing because I wanted to, not because I wanted to make money. For years, I wanted to write children's books, but I was constantly told it wasn't feasible. I invested in a tiny independent publishing business with Carol's aid. I took watercolor courses at a local studio on the weekends. I had never really lived freely before. No comparisons, no strict timetables. No, why can't you do it if Daniel can? I didn't use social media at all. No updates, no pictures. Rumors, however, managed to get through. Chloe, a college friend who used to live in the same dorm as me, was the catalyst for it all. She sent me a note one day. Sarah, did you recently purchase an Edgewood home? I swear I freaked out when I saw your picture on the neighborhood group. I almost dropped my phone. Photos of fresh standouts were frequently shared by locals in this neighborhood. This time, my Tesla was parked next to a King-branded mailbox with the remark, "What is our new neighbor supposed to be worth this much?" Whoever makes the correct guess gets a free Starbucks. I hurried to re-register everything under the company and take my name off the mailbox, but it was too late. Although Chloe remained silent, I saw 3 missed calls from my mother a week later. I didn't return the call. My cousin Lucas texted me 2 days later. Did you actually relocate to Edgewood? Everyone is conversing. Your mother believes you have a lot of money. They even inquired about my knowledge. After being ignored for years, my heart fell. All it needed for them to recall was a picture of a new house and an automobile. I was real. I knew the thing I'd feared most had finally happened, but I didn't respond to Lucas. I couldn't remain secret indefinitely. Like wind, rumors spread, and in my family, even a slight breeze may set off irrational expectations. As I was watering the plants the following morning, I noticed a well-known black SUV approach slowly and come to a halt just in front of my gate. My heart pounded. My brother Daniel was driving when the window slid down. My mother sat beside him. Perfectly curled hair and curious eyes, she made no effort to conceal. Heart pounding, I hid behind a maple tree. For a long time, they gazed at my house. Daniel then turned to face his mother and spoke. Even though I couldn't hear it, I figured it was most likely her. The dust from its tires hung in my head like a warning as the automobile sped away. Warm golden light spilled across the hardwood floor as I sat in the living room that evening. However, I wasn't as reassured as usual. It buzzed on my phone. Mom sent a message. "We must speak. We'll pay you a visit shortly." I secured the screen. No answer. I deserved to be free. The question now was, however, how would I safeguard it? Throughout the week, my mom's texts persisted. Gentle at times. "I just want to see you, sweetie. Sometimes I miss you," informal. "This Sunday, we're preparing your favorite stew. Would you like to have dinner with us?" And occasionally sweet in that artificially sweet way. "Sarah, family never dies. You will always be a part of us." regardless of where you reside or what you do. I didn't block the number, but I also didn't respond to any of them. I was curious to see just how far they would go. Daniel finally gave me a call directly after we had been silent for 2 weeks. After a long period of staring at his name on the computer, I picked up Sarah. He started to sound too happy. "Mom is terribly unhappy. Listen, you've been staying away from us." "Really? Yesterday night?" She sobbed all night. He hesitated, then changed his tone as if he were about to reveal the true cause. "So, Haley and I are getting married. Have you heard? The event will take place in the upcoming spring. Parents are overjoyed." With my gaze focused on the ceiling, I reclined in the sofa. "Yes, I did hear." I gave a quick response. "This Sunday, why don't you have supper at home? Everyone in the family will be present. Come only to have fun. Aren't we still family?" After a minute of silence, I nodded. A part of me was curious about their true desires. A part of me also wanted to remind myself of the reason I had initially left. I took a car to the old house on Sunday night. The person I once thought would return my love if I put forth enough effort. Same antique swing, same stone walkway, same white picket fence. It is still hanging beneath the porch. However, I was no longer the girl who waited for compliments. Mom gave me a slightly too tight hug as she opened the door. She replied, "You're so skinny," and without waiting for a response, she went directly to the kitchen. Dad nodded as if I were a visitor. Daniel gave me a firm pat on the back as if we were old friends getting back together after a trip. The dinner went just as planned. Discussion about Daniel and Haley alone. Mom displayed the outfit they had chosen. Dad discussed how the backyard is decorated for the wedding. I simply sat there, picked up my meal, smiled a little, and kept track of the minutes till the show was over. When dessert came, Mom tapped her spoon lightly on her glass, sending a signal with the faint clink. She started, "I have something to say." They stared at me. Although Daniel and Haley are eager for the wedding, they need to organize a formal ceremony and enlarge the house so they can move in. It will be quite expensive. I put down my glass. I held my hand steadily. Mom went on, her voice slipping into sugar-coated sweetness. "I was ready, and since you're doing so well, the family wondered whether you could be of assistance. Just about $100,000 to help with some wedding-related costs and to build a new garage." Dad gave a nod as though the matter had already been resolved. Daniel smiled hopefully as he sat back in his chair. "Sarah," he said, "you understand, I'm sure. We are related. It should be common sense to support one another when necessary." I stared at them all, a silent calm replacing the optimism in my eyes. The sort I'd worked so hard to obtain. Family. With a firm voice, I repeated, "When I was in college, where was my family? When I lived off of instant noodles for a month while working 2 jobs. Then where were you?" Nobody responded. What did my mother say to me at the time? I gazed at her, tilting my head. "Yes, exactly. Nobody is preventing you from exerting more effort?" "Well, I have now. I put forth more effort, but not to make up for the things you rejected." Nobody grinned. Nobody argued. I got up, grabbed my handbag, and gave them one more glance. "I hoped you would see me once. It was once my dream to join this family. However, it is no longer the case. Then, if you're serious about enlarging your garage." I grinned as I turned to Daniel. "Then nobody will stop you from exerting more effort." My heart felt like an old creaking door as I stepped out the door. Had shut securely and silently, and I didn't turn around this time. I made a silent drive home that evening. No music, not a podcast. Only the calm breeze seeping through the broken pane in the rearview mirror and the faint sound of the tires hitting the road. My former home's radiance faded like a vanishing memory. However, I was aware that I had not simply departed the location. I had also abandoned it in spirit. I took a big breath, slid off my heels, and dropped into the couch in the living room when I arrived home. Not all of the relief came at once. Rather, there was a subdued melancholy, as if I had just bid farewell to something that, despite its pain, had once meant everything, many times. However, things were different this time. I refrained from crying. I felt no remorse. For the first time in years, I felt like I was an adult, and not a kid trying to win affection by being good. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from my mother the following morning. "By that, what did you mean?" "You were never treated differently by me. Family comes first. Sarah, you truly hurt me. Next, from Daniel, now I have no idea who you are. All we needed was a little assistance. You also behaved strangely. I locked the phone after dropping it into a drawer. All my life, I had heard these lines. The only thing that had changed was that I no longer trusted them. On my own terms, I began my new days. No strict timetable and no need to prove anything. I poured coffee every morning, woke up early, and sat on the porch to watch the sunshine spread across the front grass. I read more, wrote more, and even began learning how to play the ukulele, something I had wanted to do in high school but never received support for. Carol helped me invest in a couple modest projects. My accountant, who had grown to be more like a personal friend, every week we discussed topics such as true freedom, self-worth, and life balance in addition to money. Over time, my home became warmer. I constructed a tall bookcase in the living room, erected a little swing in the backyard, and planted additional lavender along the fence. I adorned every nook and cranny and every object I selected. Sounded like a proclamation. I was free of the mold that had previously surrounded me. I was watering the garden one late autumn day when I heard the doorbell ring. There was a nameless white envelope on the front step. I took it open. An antique family picture was within. Daniel, my parents, and I went to Lake Erie for a summer vacation. There was one line on the back, "Home is home no matter where you are." I didn't grin. I was not depressed. Silently, I folded the picture and put it in the drawer by the fireplace. I didn't tear it or discard it. I simply no longer belonged there. I got an invitation to an art show in Columbus a week later. The new authors area contained an illustrated version of one of my children's short stories. I was the only one driving there, with a little rush of excitement in my chest and some gentle jazz playing in the car. When I walked inside the gallery, nobody applauded. I felt complete even though no one snapped photos of me next to the screen. Standing next to Daniel, soaking in meaningless acclaim, more whole than I ever was. I sat by myself in a little cafe down the street after the show, writing down fresh concepts in my leather notebook. After observing me for a bit, a little girl from the adjacent table approached. "Was Little Moon written by you?" Her eyes were shining as she inquired. I grinned and nodded. "I adore that tale. You write really well." I had been waiting my entire life to feel that from the ones closest to me, and that statement from a total stranger touched my heart. With a deep glee in my breast, I thanked her and went back to my table. There was nothing left for me to prove. There was nobody left to impress. For the first time in my life, I was living, really living, with the unmistakable conviction that I was deserving of good things, having escaped the invisible cage that was familial obligation. I had discovered that value in myself via the little things, not because someone told me so. The ensuing months flew by like a refreshing breeze on a hot summer day. My new life was full with things I never would have dreamed of while living beneath that old roof. Yet it wasn't ostentatious or noisy. I purchased a modest cottage in Vermont for extended vacations and invested in a couple ed tech businesses that Carol introduced me to. I also sometimes treated myself to a trip. To investigate, not to flee. I spent my afternoons reading under old oak trees in Oregon, my nights watching fireworks from a historic hotel balcony in Savannah, and my mornings drinking coffee by the ocean in Santa Barbara. No more tightrope walking, financial stress, cold looks, or passive-aggressive remarks. I felt more and more like the lady I had always secretly harbored with every day that went by. I started writing more frequently. Little but courageous characters, imaginative children's stories, and ambitions that are rejected by others, but never completely dashed. For the first time, I had no desire to show off my debut book to anybody in my family once it was released by a tiny Chicago press. External acceptance was not a prerequisite for success. I stopped looking at Daniel's or Mom's texts. Carol assisted me in transferring all confidential correspondence to private channels. I already had the folks who truly cared for me in my life. A few genuine professional connections, new acquaintances, and above all, a familiar voice behind me one Saturday afternoon as I was waiting for my order at my favorite organic bakery downtown. Sarah. I pivoted. Daniel was the one. His shirt was a gray plaid. His hair looked a little disheveled, as if he had just gotten out of the car. His eyes had lost their previous assurance, but other than that, he didn't appear any different from when we last saw each other. Rather, they were tinged with fatigue and a touch of resentment. He smiled weakly. "I didn't expect to see you here. Do you reside here?" I gave a nod, kind but aloof. "Yes." "Near you?" Daniel gave a shrug. "I'm just getting Haley some croissants." "She is carrying our second child." He hesitated. "Mom continues to talk about you constantly." I remained silent. For a few seconds there was silence. Daniel then gave me a direct look. "Reduce the volume of your voice. Sometimes I feel like this world isn't fair, you know." I cocked my head, my eyes steady, and said plainly, "I agree. Although life isn't fair, I've figured out how to make it so for myself." Daniel remained silent despite curving his lips as if he wanted to say something. Perhaps he saw that I was no longer the little sister who used to sit quietly at the dinner table and smile despite my sorrow. They weren't necessary for me to recognize my value. It was everything in his quiet. I had outgrown the box and he knew it. They made an effort to keep me in. After calling my name, a bakery employee gave me the warm bag. I looked to Daniel and nodded in gratitude. "I really want the best for you. That's what I mean." I left without turning around as the walkway was bathed in a gentle golden glow. I proceeded steadily and gently. I didn't have to prevail. All I had to do was survive. I sat on my balcony that evening, holding a cup of chamomile tea, gazing up at a starry sky, eyes elevated. The lavender along the fence rustled in the breeze. I reflected on the years that had gone by. Every time I was overlooked, made to feel like the additional component in comparison. For a while, I thought I was just a defective version of it. Daniel stood for something. But I was aware of the reality now. I wasn't someone else's duplicate. My name was Sarah, someone who had been disregarded and forgotten, but who also got back up and put her life back together. Is life unjust? Perhaps. However, I made it equitable, using my own hands and faith, and my newfound independence. A girl who is undervalued by her own family cannot have it taken away from her. Sarah had overcome past traumas to use her own hands to create a life of autonomy and worth. She learned to appreciate herself and live in accordance with her beliefs, instead of looking to those who had previously harmed her for approval. Sarah's tale serves as a reminder that only you have the authority to determine your own value. Sometimes the first step to achieving real happiness is leaving harmful relationships. How do you feel about Sarah's path? Have you ever had a similar experience? Please leave a comment below with your opinions, and remember to subscribe to our channel for more moving and motivational tales of self-worth and family.